Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.
It's a funny question because I am the person who doesn't take photos, who forgets to take photos at the right time. It's always other people taking photos, which is why I had a hard time getting photos to you. Because I was like, oh, well, my computer crashed. And so I lost some of my photos, which was sad because I lost some of my memories. But none of those were photos I took. So I'm not sure why I'm not a photo person. Maybe because I want to be present in the moment. And then once the moment's gone, it's gone, right? But sometimes photos are nice to look back at. But I very rarely look at photos. I very rarely take photos unless something funny happens and I'm like, oh, this is opportune time for a joke. But other than that, I'm really not a photo person.
I'm in the padded room. I'm in the padded cell. Why am I in a padded cell? Because I can't get out here unless I get 1,000 subscribers. So please subscribe to the podcast and then maybe they'll let me out. And to celebrate, I'll eat a whole Carolina Reaper and film it so you can laugh at me. So please, subscribe, share. Help me get out of this padded cell. Awesome. Thank you, Monica. That's perfect. Monica Borschel. Perfect. There's no right answer. And what you said was exactly what needed to be said.
You're welcome.
I am looking forward to getting to know you, and we will through your photos. So thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah.
Where are you right now? You're in a wooded room,
Yes,
wood panel room. Where are you?
Yeah. So I just moved last week. I moved to Big Bear City in California. So I'm in the mountains now, which is quite nice. So a lot of my house is wood.
Oh wow.
It's like an old 1970s house. Yeah.
Yeah, and you moved from.
So I was in Hong Kong until November 2010, and then I was in Orange County for a little while, and then I moved here.
Oh wow. Okay. So 2010 in Hong Kong.
Yeah, so I was in Hong Kong for 10 years. Yeah, so from November 2010 to November 2020, I was in Hong Kong.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, let's look at the first photo then. In this photograph, the one I have is of you sitting. It looks like a Hong Kong trail. It's got so it's got concrete with sort of a panel, a metallic sort of display case, I guess. It's outside. The concrete has these like pedestals or whatever. You're seated on one of them with a black T-shirt, sunglasses. Next to you is a backpack that looks quite full, so it looks quite heavy. There's also a large bottle of water next to it. And seated around you are two really sweet-looking dogs. They look like golden retrievers, Labradors or something. I'd say golden retrievers. One of them is looking right at the camera and has the cute sort of like, mouth open, tongue out, just a cute little face. And then your other dog is wearing a harness, looking off camera to the left or to the right. Around you, you don't see the sky. You see just the hillside with concrete and whatever and grass and yeah. So what's this photo? It's called Outdoors.
Yeah, I really like the outdoors, and I think that's kind of why I moved to the mountains. Is just getting back to nature is kind of like getting back to yourself, right? It's relaxing. There's no deadlines. You don't have anywhere to be. You can breathe. And my dogs like to go hiking too. And yeah, they're golden retrievers. One is more fitter than the other. So the dog looking at you in the picture is fit.
Okay.
And the other dog is not as fit, and I think he really struggled in the humidity. So that was one of those joke photos.
Okay, okay. And the backpack looks really full. Like, were you camping or were you just kind of carrying a heavy pack?
I think it's full of water because, in Hong Kong, it's that humidity. And then the dogs, because they're golden retrievers, they're furry. And
Yeah.
so you just have to carry a lot of water with those dogs.
Sure, sure,
Make sure
sure.
they're really hydrated. Make sure I'm hydrated.
Of
Yeah.
course. So,
Water is very important.
of course. In my house, we have 5 dogs, and we go hiking all the
Oh, no,
time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. So, where is the trail?
Okay, what kind of dogs do you have?
Okay, there seems to be a bit of a lag, but we'll just get through it. Well, the dogs I have are called Tong Gao, so they're Hong Kong specials. So, when you were here, did you get to meet a lot of the Hong Kong specials, like the Tong Gao?
I don't even know what that is. Where is that?
Tong Gao is like the local Hong Kong. It's not. I don't know if it's its own breed, but a Tong Gao is basically like a kind of the local dog. It's just a mixed hodgepodge mongrel. Uh,
Oh, okay. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yes, yes, yes.
yes. So
I know
we
what you mean.
rescued about 5 of them.
Sorry, I thought it was a place, but yeah. Oh, wow, good for you. That's really kind of you. Where do you live so that do you live on an outlying island or?
We live in Saikong, so we live in the country park.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
so way in the country park. So it's
Okay.
really, really amazing, with monkeys and the cows and of course tons of
Yeah.
trails. So before coming to
hmm
Hong Kong, did you know that Hong Kong is so green?
I didn't. I came from New York and I'd never been to Hong Kong before. It was totally a new adventure for me, but I was pleasantly surprised with how green Hong Kong is.
Sure. So were you coming from New York, like professionally, like moving your practice, or what's that story?
So I came with my first husband and I got divorced in Hong Kong. So he had a job and he got transferred. And at the time I had just graduated with my master's and it was the housing crisis and there was no work to be found. So New York was a really rough place in 2009, 2010. It was really rough. And so I thought, well, I have nothing to lose. Why not try a new place, see what happens?
Okay, okay. So you said you finished your master's in what was the domain, like what sector?
So I have a master's in clinical psychology.
That's awesome. That's great. Thank you for opening that door.
Oh, thank you.
So when you came to Hong Kong, did you start your practice? Did you have a practice, or did you actually start it here?
I started in Hong Kong. I actually didn't start my own practice. I worked for Mind and Life, which I still work. I just work online. So when I graduated with my master's, I came to Hong Kong, and because in the US, you can't really be a clinical psychologist with just a master's. And I didn't know in Hong Kong that you could practice with a master's, so I went back to school. So when I first got there, I was just teaching, and then I went back to school later, and then I went to HKU and got a PhD in social work. And then after my PhD, I started practicing.
Oh wow, wow. Okay, so you and I are both alumni of Hong Kong U. Great.
Oh, you went to HKU as well. We have a lot in common. We
Yeah.
have the outdoors, martial arts, HKU.
Right. Yeah. So my first degree at HKU was in clinical research methodology. So,
Oh,
clinical
wow.
trials
Okay.
research. And then my second degree
Uh
was
huh.
an MBA, which I never would have chosen, but my
Oh, wow.
my client paid me to do it. So, yeah, really nice client.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's quite the opportunity.
Well, yeah, that's kind of Hong Kong, I guess, in that way. So, okay, so let's go back to,
Yeah, Hong Kong can be magical.
yeah, you left you left HK in the middle of the pandemic, right? So what created that tension to pull you back to the US?
Um, well, I have a new partner now that I met in Hong Kong. He's also American, and he sold his business because a lot of his business was done in China, and because of the protests, it wasn't going well, I guess you could say. So he didn't exactly feel safe in Hong Kong after the protests and all of that happened. So we just came back. And so for me, it was a big choice because I love Hong Kong. But at the same time, I love my partner too. And so it was a little bit of a decision to be made. But I feel like I made the right choice.
Well, I think you made the right choice too. So where did you grow up? Because you studied in New York. So where did you grow up?
I'm from Utah originally.
Oh, wow.
And you're from Canada, right?
Yeah, I'm from Montreal.
Montreal, okay. And that's East Coast Canada?
Yep. So Montreal is about
Okay.
6 hours north of New York City. 7 hours north of New York City.
Okay, interesting.
So when did you get to New York City?
I was in New York from 2007 to 2010.
Okay.
Right in time for the housing crisis, right?
Perfect.
Okay.
It's all about timing.
Yeah, perfect timing.
Would you be able to make some kind of connections between, for example, this photo of you and this photo of you with the two dogs? Do you remember which trail you were? Was it Hong Kong Island? Was it New Territories?
I believe it was New Territories. Yeah, it must have been the New Territories because that's usually where I hiked
Okay.
with the dogs.
Right. And you brought the dogs over from the U.S. or you actually got them in Hong Kong?
So those are my partner's dogs. He got them in Hong Kong, actually in the New Territories, and then we brought them to the U.S. with us when we moved.
Wow. So look, let's move on to the next photo.
Okay.
Aha. Sweet. Okay, so this one is called Little Family. And
Yes.
there's it's a nice portrait of you in a living room. Or not you, sorry. It's a nice portrait of a man wearing a black hoodie and jeans, seated on a kind of coffee table or a bench or something. Is this your partner?
Yes.
I assume yes. Okay, very handsome fellow. Behind, okay, so
Thank you.
it's a you chose well. Really, it's inside a living room on a carpet. Really nice wooden floors. I don't know. I would guess that this isn't in a Hong Kong apartment because it doesn't quite look like the floors don't
Good
look.
guess. That is a good guess. It's not in Hong Kong. Good guess.
Yeah. Thanks, because the floor is wrong. And so what's the story behind this photo? He's kind of holding your two dogs, I guess, lovingly, and so it's really sweet. So what's this photo about?
So that again, and this is not a photo I took. This is a photo he sent me. He was at his sister's house in Atlanta. So at one point, when we first started dating, I think maybe 3-4 years ago, he wanted to climb Mount Everest.
Oh, wow.
And at the time, I was living on Llama Island with roommates, so I couldn't have taken the dogs. So he went to Atlanta with the dogs so his sister could watch the dogs with her big yard for 2 months while he climbed Everest. And then he came back, and then the dogs got shipped back after. So the dogs have had quite the adventures on airplanes.
Sure. Wow, it's amazing. So he actually summited Everest?
Yeah, he did.
Wow. I think I'm going to have to start having a crush on him.
Oh, maybe he's your next person to talk to.
No, it's great. It's great. So okay, so he sends you this photo, very sweet, and this was how many weeks before he actually went over to
maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I'm guessing.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. So at the time, what was going on in your life? Like you're in Hong Kong, you're living on Llama?
Yeah, I was living in Llama. I was still working on my PhD, I think, or I was just getting ready to graduate. I was living in Llama with roommates because I was on a student visa, which means you can't legally work. So I was living on this stipend, which isn't much, and you got to pay your tuition, rent, all of that on that. So yeah, I was living in Llama.
So what was your thesis?
So my thesis was on attachment and loss, so different attachment styles and grief and different outcomes like PTSD, complicated grief, or resilience.
Huh. Okay.
So I guess if I were to simplify, it's kind of like our attachment style can be overall how we view relationships in general, or they can be relationship specific. And so I was looking at relationship specific to the deceased, plus the overall attachment style with bereavement outcomes.
Oh, okay. You brought up PTSD, but how does that? Aren't those? I don't know. Like from what the little I know, are those like internally? How are those two connected?
Well, if, let's say, someone dies in a very traumatic way, like suicide or an accident, it can be a lot harder than if somebody you get to say goodbye to, you have some closure.
Right,
And so
right.
the PTSD could be from the trauma of the sudden death.
Okay, right. Okay. So in my 20s, I went. My best friend and I went on a bike ride, and outside of Montreal, and there's these rock faces, and so we started climbing these rock faces. No climbing experience whatsoever. Just in our 20s, just kind of dumb. And he had done rock climbing, and it wasn't rock climbing back then. Wasn't like it is kind of now, which is everywhere and kind of well practiced. So we made it up about 50 or 60 feet, and then he fell. So that trauma, yeah, then seeing him fall straight down a rock face, and then having to climb down without falling myself, and we weren't using ropes, we weren't using any safety whatsoever. So very stupid. And then climbed down, revived him because he was, he had fractured his skull and he was unconscious. And then getting a rescue team out there because it was quite remote. And then getting him to the hospital and intubated and he had like basically surgery to reposition his skull. But then he survived, right? And so I talk about how the post-traumatic or the trauma of seeing my friend fall was, one of the sort of the near-death experiences that really shaped me. And so from your practice, is it always when it's connected to actual death and loss, or is it more just open? Because so in that case, like when you're explaining, when you're dealing with somebody who just dies and that trauma, I could see how that could totally shake you. Whereas in my case, because he survived, it was an empowering moment.
Okay. Well, that's interesting, right? Because there's a concept of post-traumatic growth. So most people are resilient. And some people, for maybe the way their body, their nervous system is wired, the way their fight or flight system is wired, they might develop PTSD, but not everyone's going to develop that. Not everyone's going to get depressed or anxious. Most people don't. We grieve, right? Which is a little bit different. It's a natural process. It's part of life, unfortunately. I'm very curious about your post-traumatic growth experience. If you feel like sharing, I know it might be personal.
It's shooting it raw. It's all personal. It's all good.
Okay.
So basically, a thesis of the podcast is: if life really is a gift, how do we make every second count? Right?
Yeah.
So when my friend almost died, that kind of facing your mortality and your friend's mortality, because that trauma was definitely about witnessing his pain and his, the suffering. Because when he was unconscious, and when he was conscious, he was conscious for maybe about an hour or two, and then the rescue team got to us, and then I don't know if they sedated him or not, but they took him away in an ambulance, and then at the hospital they intubated him. I'm not really sure of how much he remembers, but that trauma was really most acutely felt by the people around him, right? Because we saw him. So that's one.
Sure. It would be so scary.
Yeah. And a few months after that, I was standing at a street corner going to make him dinner, actually. And then a car came up the sidewalk and ran over me. And I had like brain injury. I was comatose. I don't know if you learned about Glasgow coma scales, but I had a very, very severe brain injury. And so then I was, paralyzed and all this stuff. So then, amazingly, incredibly, I completely recovered. But what I remember was the trauma of seeing my friend on the intubate, on the intubated on the ventilator in the hospital just a few months earlier. So I kind of know what it must have been like for everybody around me to see me so close to death, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you made it.
Yes. Well, which is kind of informs why this podcast is together. It's like one moment, everything's fine, and I'm sure you can talk to about how people cope when all of a sudden everything is not fine, or everything does fall apart.
Well, there's a lot of different ways, right? So for you, you saw your friend, and then randomly the same thing happened to you. And then it was hard for you to see people around you that love you be so scared for you. I mean, I had a similar experience in January of 2009. I lost my best friend in a very weird accident as well, and it was shocking, and it totally changed my life. After that, I was like, I need to tell people I love them. I need to appreciate them. I need to appreciate my own life. Every minute is precious, and maybe that's part of why I'm not a big photographer. Like, I want to be in the moment.
Right. Okay.
So I think people get bogged down in life with a lot of concern about what other people think.
Yeah.
So how do I look? How do I appear? Am I the right weight? Am I the right profession? Am I successful? That's a lot of stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? That being said, when you're in survival mode for finances, you're just barely scraping by, or you feel like you don't have any connections for whatever reason, you feel isolated and alone, it's kind of hard to appreciate life because you're just surviving. You're not thriving.
Yeah.
And so for you, your life literally was on the line. You were very much in survival mode. And half of it you don't remember, I guess, because you're comatose, right?
Yep. Yep.
So what was that like? How did you come back out of that and say life is precious?
Right.
What lessons did you learn from that?
Right. So I'm going to step back for 1 second to say I had no idea this was going to be the conversation, and I love this. I mean, this is great. This is great. I love discovering your pace. So how you speak, your cadence, and where we're going in this direction. Like, and as we're talking, I've got this photo of this nice man hugging these two dogs as the backdrop, which is very sweet, But to go back to and I don't want this to be an episode about me, because in a way I want to reflect, like, what got you. So the things that got me to really feeling that every second is a gift and we should make every second count is, okay, so my friend almost dies, and I see that. And that trauma was witnessing his near death. A few months later, I have the experience of, so the couple of weeks before I was hit by that car, I don't remember. It was all wiped away, right? So, and then I was in a coma only for like a week. And then I woke up, and then when I woke up, I was paralyzed. And for about a month, I had basically only short-term memory. So I could not remember more than, say, 2 or 3 minutes at a time. And then and then the reason why I was paralyzed was because the brain hemorrhage, like the blood and the pressure in my brain was kind of shutting down the left side of my body. And then as that got healthier, or as that healed, I could also remember more. And so my memory came back in a fog, right? So I could start remembering little moments here and there. But then the question is, where was I during that 2-month period of no time? Like where was I? I had no memory connecting that time, so it's gone. And then,
That's amazing.
yeah, well, not for the people around me. For me, it was such an empowering experience. And so really empowering experience. It really shaped my life. Okay. And then in 2004, my wife and I took surfing lessons in Sri Lanka, and that ontology or that perspective, because on the sixth lesson of our surfing lesson was the tsunami. And so we were in the water when the tsunami happened. We were surrounded by people drowning.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we're surrounded by people drowning. We were separated. She didn't know if I survived. I didn't know if she survived. There's definitely the trauma of seeing all the village around us and the whole country of Sri Lanka, really, and the world, really, well, all the nations hit so badly. And so that trauma is more of a we ontology. It's like it was such a shared trauma. But again, I found that very empowering. So here's what's interesting. So far, all of this stuff was amazing. Like I felt empowered and a survivor and all that feeling. But then what pushed me over the edge to start having general anxiety disorder, arguably post-traumatic stress or whatever, is the financial crisis, housing crisis that you felt when you were in New York City. So it's a funny thread that connects.
Yeah, that was hard.
Yeah. Like that's what really messed me up more than anything. That's what really kind of shook my foundation to the point that I'm still feeling those effects daily, in terms of the general anxiety disorder. But it's kind of funny that in terms of human resilience, I guess. So how do you interpret all the words I've just thrown at you in the past 5 minutes? Sorry.
It's interesting, right? Because I have financial anxiety too, because during the housing crisis, I was living on food stamps in Harlem. So I was living next to the projects. I was very poor.
Holy
I remember
shit.
one day I went to the laundromat and I had $20 in my pocket, my last $20, and I lost it. And that was all I had. I was so bummed out.
Holy shit.
It
How
got
scary.
so bad that my friends, this is a true story, had an intervention for me to get on food stamps. And I was like, but I'm taking away from needy families. They're like, you're needy.
Yeah.
Before that, I didn't have money to eat. I had a really
Wow.
good friend in Brooklyn who would feed me every single night.
Oh, wow.
So I'd have one meal a day. I'd go from Harlem to Brooklyn, which took me over an hour, and then back home just so I could
Monica.
eat. So
Wow.
I get really nervous about money too, because it's survival.
Yeah.
We're not being chased by lions anymore. We have to pay our bills. We have to pay rent. We need money to eat, right?
Yeah.
So it's very survival based.
Wow.
And so I'm very curious. You and I have a lot of similarities. We've both been through quite a bit of trauma. And I'm always curious myself if trauma just starts adding up. It's like first few times I'm okay. And then it's like, oh, this is getting hard. This is getting really hard. All these weird random things keep happening, right? And I don't know. I don't have research to back this up. I'm wondering if you just get worn down. You get tired. You get exhausted. And so when our body's not fed, when we're not having water, when we're not getting exercise, it's also hard because it's linked to our survival, right? And so you saw your friend fall, but he lived.
Yeah.
You had a very tragic accident, but you lived. You and your wife saw some horrible things, but you lived.
Yeah.
But then what about finances? Oh my God, how are we going to pay rent? How are we going to eat? What's going to happen now? Am I going to be homeless? Am I going to die?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Woo. Okay. That's a lot. Okay. So, yeah. Well,
that's a lot.
No, but I'm listening to your story as well in terms of the mythology of the U.S. is land of plenty and opportunity and all this stuff. And then you're in New York. People talk about Nylon Kong, right? So New York, London, Hong Kong, right? So somehow you were drawn to New York, one of, a hub, arguably the biggest hub of industry and whatever in North America and arguably the world. And then you got London and you got Hong Kong. So then you're drawn to Hong Kong, another mega city, where financial insecurity, it looms very large, right? Like
Oh, yes.
there's no safety net.
Mm-hmm.
So when the financial crisis happened, my income went down by 90%, right? And
Wow.
luckily, my wife was able to carry me along. And actually, right now with COVID, we're right back at that same spot. Like, it's been really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
If we talk about resilience and strength, like, you're living on Lama. When you got to Hong Kong, this was after on the upswing of the financial crisis?
In New York, it still felt very much like the financial crisis because it's a big finance city. And so people with masters, PhDs were having a hard time finding work. I was just hustling. I was working as a bartender when I could, catering, whatever I could do, right? And people were being treated quite poorly because so many people needed a job. So I worked in this bar with immigrants and we didn't have a wage and this guy wasn't paying taxes on us and he was quite abusive, but the tips were great. And so you just worked really hard. You took your tips home, pretended like that didn't just happen, the bad treatment you just went under. So yeah, financial stress is very real. And then I came to the US and I'm still working at Mind and Life, but because my hours are now very odd, same. I also took more than probably the same, like probably 70% hit in finances.
Oh, wow.
So I understand how that gives people anxiety for sure, because how do you come out of that hole?
Mm-hmm.
You absolutely can, but sometimes you have to reinvent yourself. Yep. Sometimes you have to get creative. Sometimes you have to hustle, right? And it's hard work. It's exhausting. And then that exhaustion adds to the anxiety because your body's like, hey, what are you doing to me? I need rest. I need food. I need sleep. What are you doing?
Yep. So I kind of felt that it was like, I don't know, for a little bit, I had this in my head that I was having adrenal fatigue. That's it. Because my body's so often in this like fight or flight mode that I'm constantly getting this adrenaline sort of pumping and the cortisol and all this stuff, and then finally my body just said, okay, enough, done. It's sort of like how diabetics no longer have this insulin resistance, right? So in a way, it's like over time of just constantly having that stressor. It's like my body was no longer able to just cope, and it was just like chemically unable to maintain kind of a buffer against all these swings. So I take an SNRI and helps me manage.
Yeah, because that's how our bodies work, right? Yep. It's like we can only stay in that stress state for so long before we hit exhaustion.
Mm-hmm. And so when I listen to your voice right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your exhaustion? Because you're also keeping these really strange hours to serve Hong Kong clients.
It's weird. I go in these cycles. Like yesterday, I think I slept for like 20 hours because I just moved and I had to clean my house and then I wasn't doing a good job taking care of myself. I was like, I have to keep going because I need to get back to work and I have so much to do. And I totally wore myself down.
Okay.
But when I don't do that, when I'm like reminding myself, you need to eat, you need to drink some water, you need to take a nap, I'm fine. So when we were looking for this house, I wasn't able to take a nap because we had to drive 2 hours out of Orange County to get here and then 2 hours back and then I'd have to go to work. And that week I didn't take a nap. I totally crashed. I slept for like 20 hours. I missed a client. I missed my supervision meeting. I literally crashed. So I myself work really, really hard and I don't always accomplish it to stay out of that exhaustion cycle.
Right.
So basically, if I take naps, I'm totally fine. Okay. It's when I don't take naps that I end up just crashing.
So fine. So my wife did not grow up with napping. She just can't. She just doesn't. Okay. I will have 3 naps in a day.
Uh-huh.
Like it's just like
Oh, good for you. Good for you.
look, and because we said nap, and because we said napping, and because we're looking at our bodies and being happy and well balanced, let's take this moment to move to the next photo.
Okay.
Okay, great. Oh, boom! I love this. This is awesome. So, okay, you send the photos. I don't look at all I do is I'm very careful to make sure the size is okay, and that the basics are there.
Okay.
But I try not to look at the actual photograph, right? As a perfect sort of
Okay.
segue, here's a photo. It looks like a kind of a more corporate photo. I hope we're allowed to use it. But there's a logo VSG Vanda Sports Group on the bottom right. But it's a photo.
Oh yeah, Vanda. Uh-huh.
So it's a photo of 3 people in a ring, in a boxing ring. One person is wearing like is in red. One person is in blue. The people are wearing headgear, the sort of like head protection, which is very good. The ref is all in white. It's in the back, kind of mid step. It's a funny photograph. In the photo, the 2 boxers. One person is it looks like a hook to the right to hit the blue boxer is kind of hooking to the right over the shoulder, and the one in the red is almost like jabbing to the front, and it's like the glove is right there in the person's face. You're in a room, or the boxers are in a room. There's an audience. There's an audience of, I don't know, a few hundred people. So I assume this was before COVID, because there are also, and it's in a room with like...
way before, yeah. I think that's like 2011, maybe?
Oh, okay.
Or 2012. I think it's 2012.
Okay, so what's the situation here?
Okay, so going back to the housing crisis. When I was hustling, barely getting by, I met someone who thought eventually perhaps he could teach me how to box, and then we kind of take it to the next level. Maybe I could make some money.
Oh,
I'm
really?
telling you, I was doing all kinds of weird things to survive.
Wait, stop.
Yeah,
Stop.
I didn't ever have a competition.
What?
Okay. The story.
I love it. Go.
Okay, so this is in New York when I first learned how to box, but that photo you're looking at is in Hong Kong.
Okay.
So I started to learn how to box, and then when I met my ex-husband, he said champions don't fall in love. He didn't want to teach me how to box anymore. So I started at this little, really cheap boxing gym called, Kingsway or something like that in Chelsea. And it was reasonable, but it was how I totally dealt with my stress. It was what kept me going, honestly. There were times I was like, I have nothing but boxing.
Yeah.
So then I moved to Hong Kong, and the first thing I do is look for a boxing gym, and I find Impact through Vanda.
Okay.
Because I'm Googling boxing, and I come to Vanda, and I could see they have competitions and things, and they're like, oh, go to Impact, where I met Alon. First thing I see him, he's grinning from ear to ear.
Yeah.
He was amazing. He totally took me under his wing.
Aww.
And then my boxing trainer, David, was just always pushing me to be better. And he was a great trainer. And I trained with him for like 8 years.
Awesome.
And it was amazing. And there were moments in my life, because, I was going through a divorce, and then I was living on this stipend for my PhD. And, Hong Kong, you need money.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't even afford to hang out, like go to bars or go to dinner with my friends. I was broke. So I boxed. I boxed through all of it.
Wow.
So I ended up, I think, having 12, 13 competitions in Hong Kong.
What?
And that picture is my first competition.
Oh.
And that is a white collar fight that Vanda put on. And then my friends were there to support me, which is great.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I still love boxing. I still box. I haven't had the chance yet to look for a boxing gym in Big Bear, but I'm very excited to find it.
Ah, nice. I am all over this. This is great. So, a bit of convergence in this way as well. So, Alain Galani, when I moved to Hong Kong in 2003, I looked for a Muay Thai gym, and he was part of a very tiny gym on Lama, actually, That was I think it was the first Impact
Oh,
gym. Was
really?
on
Okay.
Lama. It was tiny.
Okay.
And I remember
I didn't know that.
yeah, and I remember walking in, and he's like, okay, now he's older, so this was like 17, 18 years ago. But I remember walking
Uh-huh.
into this little gym, and there's a big heavy bag, and he's such a beast, and him kicking the bag
Yes.
so hard that the big heavy bag essentially swung up and hit the ceiling, and I was just like, holy shit, this guy's insane, and also the sweetest person you could ever meet.
Exactly. He looks so mean, but he's like a big teddy bear. But maybe he doesn't want me to say that on air. But he's a very nice guy. He's a
No,
good person.
he's so good. He's so good, and I mean, look, I think he reached the title of World Muay Thai champ, fighting in Thailand,
Yeah.
in Bangkok. So that's great.
Hmm.
Yeah, so how often do you suggest martial arts or an intense sport to your clients as a means of as a coping mechanism?
I kind of see where they are, how much they like fitness or not. And if they're not into fitness, I ask them to take it slow, do something, right? Because it's so healthy to move your body. That's part of what I'm talking about, keeping your body out of that survival feeling is physical fitness. But
Yeah,
martial arts, I think, is amazing for stress, and it's amazing for training your mind and focus and finding peace and all of that. Sometimes I recommend it, sometimes I don't. It just depends on the person
sure.
and what they're into. Because if people are already into sports, they have their thing, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
but I have recommended it to some people.
Yeah, like for some people, like for example, my wife, it's long distance hiking, right? So she just does long distance, and you
Yeah.
reach that sort of that place of like mental sort of meditative balance, I guess. When you do like hikes that are longer than 4 or 5 hours, right? Like you totally hit a nice meditative
Uh-huh.
state that way. And for me, my
Hmm.
like Muay Thai and now I'm doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. These are my two happy places. It's great.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely helps you to get into the zone.
Right. Was your motivation to go in this area, of counseling, psychology, clinical psychology? Is it like the driver that fundamentally inside you connected with the fact that, hey, there's a lot of personal pain here, and I want to help others, and this is how I'm going to do it by going towards that crisis area in your own self.
Well, I started my career as a graphic designer actually. And so I think I was a graphic designer from 2001 to 2004. And it was just starting to get to me because it was like political time and people were voting. And I was like, I already know who's going to win because they have the
Mm-hmm.
most ads. And then I was like, I'm part of this system that's brainwashing America. And I don't like it. So then I went into therapy myself, um,
Yeah.
to find myself, to find my identity, to figure out what next, right? I didn't have another plan. I thought I was going to be a graphic designer forever. And at the time, my boyfriend was suffering from depression and he'd stay in bed for like 3 days. And I didn't understand it. I was like, just get out of bed, just
Mm-hmm.
go, just do something. So then I started reading about depression. I thought, oh, that's fascinating. And then I started reading more and more psychology, like, oh, wow, this is super interesting. So then I went to University of Utah, where I had amazing professors, and I just loved it. I just soaked it up. I was like, wow, this is how our mind and our body work together. That's amazing. And for sure, I could identify with some of it. For sure, it was like, oh, this is what's happening with me. This is what's happening with people I love. This is great. And yeah, I'd love to keep going with this. I never knew I was going to be a psychologist then. I thought, oh, I'm on the research track.
Right.
But my master's and my PhD kind of showed me, well, my research skills could be better. I'm not that great at statistics, but I am good, and I don't mean to like brag or anything, but I'm good with connecting to people because I
Sure.
like people. I
Sure.
care about their stories, and I've been through a lot of trauma myself, and so I feel like, well, if I can get through this, I want to help you get through this, and I know how to get you through this. I want to sit with you on this journey, and I want to see you thrive.
Amazing. this idea of giving back to another person, right? And so here we are in this really strange time where there's a collective. Okay, so my experience with a tsunami was that, by calling it a we trauma, a we ontology, that hundreds of thousands of people at the same moment either died or were threatened with death, or all suddenly, millions of people all of a sudden had to contend with this incredible shock, right? And so that experience really kind of created one sort of point of awareness. But then now with the pandemic, like, professionally speaking, on your side, in terms of how you're seeing your clients, because you're in the weird sort of space where your body is in the United States, thousands of miles away
Yeah.
from your clients who are here in Hong Kong.
Yes.
And Hong Kong is going through some really intense, not only the pandemic, but also political and social and all kinds of
yes.
shocks. So what?
Oh yeah.
How about you speak to that professionally?
What do you mean? You mean being online?
No, but like in terms of, I know you can't speak about specific patients, but what have you seen it? Okay, so my degree is in clinical trials, like research methodology, right? So a lot of that was statistics.
Yeah.
So what would happen if you were
Yes.
to make a statistical analysis of the past, or your patients of the past, say 2 or 3 years? What trends could you identify?
That is a very good question, because as you know, there's this quarantine thing going on in Hong Kong, right? And people can't get out.
Yeah.
So they're starting to feel trapped. That's what I've seen is people. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of a timeline. So when COVID hit, actually, let's start with the protests. When the protests started, a lot of people were scared because some of them were violent. And people were scared. Okay, well, what next? What's going to happen next? So all this underlying trauma that maybe people have put in the back of their mind, or they weren't even aware was a thing, started coming to the surface. And unfortunately, a lot of abuse. People were like, this has triggered my trauma. This has triggered my abuse. So that was that. And then the pandemic comes, and then people get anxious. What next? What's going to happen next? And then the political situation, and then quarantine, people start to feel trapped, and they start to feel, oh my God, what next? And so it was a lot. Hong Kong went through a really hard time of what next? What next?
Yeah.
What next? What next? Right? And so now I'm seeing a lot of people leaving, and I don't know if you are as well.
Yep. Definitely.
Yeah. So people are leaving. A lot of my clients have already left, right? They left before I did.
Okay. Yeah. Somebody's listening to this who recognizes themselves.
Yes.
What can we give them as a means to cope? What can we give a listener who is willing to open that door and look at the sort of the fear and the anxiety back there, who recognizes it, who recognizes themselves in what we're saying? Like, what can we say, or what can you say to them to help them find some level of stability?
Yeah, so there's this concept of psychological flexibility, and it's linked to resilience. There's this gray area people do not like to be in, right? They like clear answers. They like planning. They like to say, okay, I know what's happening. And when we're in this gray area, we get scared because we can't see it. But there's a lot of things we have to remember we can't see. Like, you didn't know your friend was going to fall. You didn't know you're going to get hit by a car. So waiting for that other shoe to drop is kind of a waste of time, a waste of energy, because we literally can't predict it. So in this gray area, it's a good time to analyze your feelings, right? Because if we avoid our feelings, it's going to chase us. If we push it down, it's going to get bigger. If we connect with our body, right? If we pay attention to what's happening in our body and we be curious, Okay, why is my heart beating so fast? Am I excited? Am I scared? Okay, let's look at my fear bucket. What's in there? For every single fear, can I come up with a plan? If I can't, how do I get comfortable with this gray area? How do I get comfortable with the unknown? What do I need? What do I need to say to myself? What do I need from others? What do I need to say to others?
Yeah. This is a really unexpected depth or territory that we've gone into, and I also love that as we're talking about this, there's a photo of it's a room in red light taken at the eye level, say, of somebody standing looking through the ropes of a boxing ring, and in it, are you in red or are you in blue?
Good question. I don't remember. I think I'm in red.
Okay. Well, you're the one who's jabbing somebody right in the kisser, right in the face. And so...
Yeah, that would be
You're competitive. I love it. Awesome. So, yeah, get into your body. We're talking about resilience. We're talking about strength. We're talking about somehow. Is it a question of containing our fears? Is it a question of coming to terms with them? Like, how do we uplift somebody listening now who may be seeking help and some kind of stability?
I can summarize it very clearly. It's the same thing I feel like I say every day. You matter and you count.
Nice.
And I say that because when people have trauma, when people have been abused, they start to believe they're worthless. And that's not the case. You matter and you count.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to be a bully to yourself, you got to use a nurturing voice, a self-compassionate voice. What would you say to your friend in the same situation? Someone you love in the same situation? You wouldn't bully them. You'd be like, it's okay. We're going to get through this.
Right.
And that voice is healing, right?
Yeah, 100%. Monica, how do I say your last name? Borschel?
Yes. Borschel,
Thank you so much. You're awesome. And
thank you too. You are too. I'm so glad you did this.
Yeah, for sure.
It's so amazing that we have so much in common.
Yeah, well, look, hopefully one day we'll be in the ring together and you can flatten me out. Looking forward to it.
Or I can run away from you. One of the two.
I'm a lover, not a fighter. Oh, thank you so much, Monica. Have a great evening.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.